Nubatama VR is finally here, and that thing is crazy.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome to an extra edition of Cardfight Updates. Today, right out of nowhere, Bushiroad decided to reveal the VR as well as a support card for Nubatama. And that thing is pretty damn insane, and a lot of people are losing their shit about how strong the card can potentially be. And today I want to go over the card, see what it does, how it interacts, but at the same time also look at the other cards that Nubatama got revealed in the last couple of days, as we didn't really have the time to do so. So I thought, why not right now as we're talking about this VR at the same time. First one I want to talk about is a new grade 1 that is Fiend Tsumujibasho, and its skill is act on rearguard circle, once per turn, cost soul +1. Your opponent chooses a card from his or her hand, discard it, and this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn for each grade of that card. Your opponent reveals the top card of his or her deck and puts it into his or her hand. So basically you cycle a card for your opponent's hand, but at the same time you gain power. But the good side is you know for a fact what kind of card they just added to their hand. So you also have some knowledge about their hand. And that's not something to just ignore in a game like Cardfight Vanguard. But in general, this card is pretty damn good, as you get always some good value out of it. Because if your opponent decided to throw away a trigger and they draw a new trigger, then yes, you do not get any more power, but at the same time, they probably not gonna get any more shield value out of it unless they dropped a draw trigger or a crit trigger and gain a new heal trigger for that fact. But at the same time, they just removed another trigger from the deck, so that's a positive thing. But besides that, anything else they're gonna discard is gonna get some advantage. If they discard a grade 1, they lose 10k shield, but you gain 10k power, so that's a 20k difference. They need to draw a heal trigger from their deck to compensate for the difference. If they threw away a grade 2, that's 5k shield for them, but that's plus 20 on this unit. So that's a difference of 25k. So that will always result in a plus power gain for you. And if they discard a grade 3, that's plus 30 on your part. So that's at least a plus 10 or more power difference in what they're gonna draw. So in general, this card is gonna help a lot. The only downside is it allows your opponent to cycle through the deck, and some clans can benefit from them if they are somewhat combo heavy and they need to find a certain key pieces. So you need to be wary when to use it, but in general, this card can be insane in the right conditions. But I also got another grade 1, and that's Stealth Dragon Kokujyo, and its skill is very interesting. It's an auto, rearguard, and guardian circle skill. When placed from hand, if there are no face-up cards in your damage zone, countercharge 1. This is basically a similar card that we've seen time and time again, that when you place it, there's nothing face up. You can then turn something face up with a counter charger. It's not really revolutionary in that sense. You can combine it with Magatsu Storm to bounce it back to get some more use out of it. But what's more interesting about this card is that you can play a certain mind game with your opponent. If you end your turn with no counterblast, they might think, alright, they're gonna attack you only once, and I'm not gonna give you any more counterblast, so you cannot work with it, so you might not be good in favorable position. But you can use this card to then flip open one phase of damage as well as guarding at the same time. So it has some nice interactions with that. Also, it works with Magatsu Storm, as Magatsu Storm defensive skill costs a counterblast to then make a perfect guard for yourself. You can then guard with that unit to flip the counterblast open, or guard with that beforehand to get the counterblast that you then can use to use a perfect guard skill. So it synergizes with Magatsu Storm what it wants to do, but also have some nice interaction for the clan in general. Then we got a very interesting grade 3 that I'm not really sure what they were thinking with the card, and that's Shura Stealth Dragon Tedo Kongo. And Tedo Kongo has two auto skills. His first one is auto. When it is retired from the rearguard circle in the front row during your opponent's turn, you may draw a card. Right when I see the skill, it screams Magatsu Storm. It synergizes what Magatsu Storm wants to do. You can retire it to make a perfect guard, but then proc this skill to also get another draw from it. It is a great synergy with the card in that sense. Also, it works a little bit against something like a control clan like Shadow Paladin or Kagero. They cannot just easily snipe this thing because you're gonna plus from it. So it works against control clans. But then we look at this second skill, and it's auto. When rode upon, if there are 4 or less cards in your opponent's hand, you may call this card to the rearguard circle. So in general sense, his second skill will enable his first skill, but besides that, it doesn't synergize with most archetypes within Nubatama, as most of them want to have the Great Free in the soul. So calling him out doesn't really help Magatsu Storm in that sense, but also with the hand condition, it looks like it was supposed to work with Kuchikiri Kongo, and sure, Kuchikiri Kongo doesn't need a Great Free in the soul, so it might function with that. But then it will also function with the new VR, but that VR actually wants to have a Great Free in the soul to make it more powerful. So it's a little bit weird in how that thing works with, but at the same time works against what it probably is supposed to do. But overall, a very interesting Great Free that can work with some archetypes, as I prescribed with the interaction with Magatsu Storm. So I'm very curious how this thing is going to shape up the deck, as we're going to find out more interactions and more logical plays with this card. But it isn't the only rearguard Great Free that we got, because we've got this insane rearguard Great Free that is Stealth Rogue of Abstinence Mizukaze, as its skill is incredible. It's auto and rearguard circle, when placed, costs Soul Blast 1 Great Free, and until end of turn, your opponent cannot call cards from his or her hand to the Guardian Circle with the same grade that he or she called during this turn. Cards can be called at the same time. If one is called, no more cards can be called. So basically what it does, it limits your opponent in using his own guards effectively. When they're gonna guard your attack, they need to guard everything from their hand within a similar grade, and then after that guarding, you can no longer use that grade. So if I'm attacked with a rearguard and you use a trigger, you can no longer guard with grade zeros after that. Also what's interesting is that it restricts guarding from hand, but the condition to restrict guarding from hand doesn't say that the card needs to be called from hand. So when you're up against Grand Blue and they use the Ghosty grade 1 from the Dropstone skill for their first attack, after that point, your opponent can no longer call grade 1s from their hand. They can only use grade 1s from the drop zone with the Ghosty if they want to guard with that unit. So you need to be very careful when you're up against this card, how you're gonna guard, because after your first time you place something, you can no longer place it. You can place multiple at the same time. So when you attack, you're gonna call 2 grade zeros at the same time. You can do that. Guarding from hand is one moment. So you can call everything from your hand, but after that, when you've stated this is what I'm gonna call, you can no longer call with those grades that you just called. Overall, that's already a very powerful skill. But in combination with Kuchikiri Kongo, you can make an OTK in standard. Because with Kuchikiri Kongo, you can bounce back a grade 1 and a grade 2. That's not really hard to do. And at that point, your opponent can no longer guard with grade 1s and 2s for that turn. Then if you slap this thing onto the field, then most decks only have grade 0s left to guard with. But the problem is, when you have 3 attacks left, they can only guard 1 attack with their grade 0s, and after that they can no longer guard the rest of your attacks because they are locked out of their grade 0s, their grade 1s, and their grade 2s. Only certain decks can survive 1 extra attack, because Protect can use their Protect marker to guard against 1 lane, but after that they can no longer use their Protect marker because they're then locked out of their Protect grade, because Protect markers have their own grade called Protect. And for the case of Dimension Police Bermuda Triangle, they can only use 1 of their grade 3s for 1 attack, because after that they are also locked out of those cards. And there aren't really that many clans that can then also generate an extra attack out of some other region. Only Grand Blue can do it with the grade 1 Ghosty, and Angel Feathers cannot potentially do with the grade 3 that can call something from the damage zone. So there are some decks, but those are very niche cards. So this card has some insane OTK potential for standard in combination with Kuchikiri Kongo. And that's very, very oddly enough, once again, a very low budget strategy, as it's just rares and double rares and not really anything else. But let's take a look at the new VR, as that's basically the reason why we're making this video, and that is none other than Shura Stealth Dragon Jamakongo. And Jamakongo has 1 skill, but a skill that is making a lot of people sweat for potential power creep and insanity for standard as well as premium, as its skill is Auto on Vanguard Circle when placed. And at the end of each turn, your opponent chooses 6 cards from his or her hand and discard the rest from hand. If your soul has a grade 3, he or she chooses 4 cards instead of 6. This is exactly what I meant by the other grade 3 that calls himself from the soul, that it doesn't really synergize with this card as well, as you actually want to have that grade 3 in your soul to make this card more powerful. Overall, This is a very powerful card because, very obviously, the moment that you write it, your opponent only has 6 cards left in his hand, or less, depending how many cards they had at the time. And after that, at the end of each and every turn, they need to discard more, so they are keeping at that cap. So they can never start a turn with more than 6 cards, but at the same time, they can never end the turn with more than 6 cards. And if you write on top of it, that's lower to 4, and that's pretty deadly. However, I need to be realistic and state that it isn't as powerful as a lot of people are thinking it out to be, especially in standard, as yes, in standard, playing with a low hand size isn't really favorable, but what this clan does in fight is just early rush. If you just rush it very hard, then the discard doesn't really do anything. If you are below that 6 cards when they ride into this thing, then it's just a 12k vanilla that doesn't really do anything. And that's the danger of this card. It doesn't really do besides the discarding, so it just is a 12k beater on its own without anything. And the problem is that the biggest threat to a protected clan, especially as Nubatama, is Axel. And what is something that most Axel decks have? A low hand size. It's not really that difficult for an Axel clan to just dump their hand and get some value out of it while still retain lower than that 6 mark or later game with 4. The only thing that it's gonna be effective against are 4s and especially against protect. But then again, what they can do is just guard early game very aggressively, so they're sitting at a low damage count, and then when they are sitting at only a max of 4 cards after that, they can just take some damage. Because don't forget, it's not that hard to guard against this clan, as most of their columns aren't really that high. It is now possible with the new grade 1, but then again, your opponent can counterplay that strategy. So you need to be very realistic with this card. Yes, it's going to be very powerful, but it is counterplayable by the fact that you can either rush them really hard or be very defensive early game and use your cards. Also, a fun thing is, it is the best friend of any type of restander, because that minusing you make for discard isn't really that tough or isn't really that hard to deal with, as you probably already need to discard it at the end of your turn anyways. But it's even more perfect for the end, as it just fixes the condition for the end to restand each and every turn. So yeah, there are some downsides to this card, and those are really big downsides if you're looking at in perspective of what the latest cards are. But in premium sense, this is what a lot of people are flipping their mind over. In premium, I don't think it's going to be that insane, that impactful, as it's just doing what the Nubatama discard engine already was doing, only maybe a little bit faster in some sense, but not as fast as people are thinking, because if you combine it with Rinne, it's still a second strike kill potential. If we are seeing after premium collection, a lot of decks are now first try deadly. So this card doesn't contribute to that fact at all. It helps your opponent to discard a lot of cards, but then again, the same strategies apply in premium as well as standard. You can rush them real hard, or you can just be very defensive, or just play the grade 2 game. This clan cannot really play the grade 2 game, and some clans like Luart and Bermuda Triangle can easily just outpace them very fast. But it doesn't end with this, because there is one last card we need to talk about that's basically supporting this guy to make it a little bit more viable. As I talked before, on its own, it's not really that deadly, but with this new unit, it can be. And that is this grade 2 stealth rogue of Ferocity, Soul. And Soul skill is on a regular circle, one place. If your Vanguard is a Shura Stealth Dragon Jamakongo, so the new VR, until end of turn, this unit gets power plus 5k, and when your opponent would call cards from his or her hand to the Guardian Circle for the battles that this unit attacked, he or she must call 2 or more at the same time. So basically, it's the Battle Doorway on a rearguard specifically for this new VR. That is going to be very deadly, especially if you put them down to 4 cards in their hand. Then 2 of these bad boys on the rearguard columns, that basically means that your opponent can only guard those 2 attacks and not your Vanguard, or let one of those rearguards through. And you can make a very deadly ODK strategy with the grade 3 that force your opponent to guard only with unique grades each and every attack, or each time they place a card onto the field. Because if you do that, your opponent is forced to discard their cards, but have 2 pairs of 2 different grades. So they need to have 2 grade 1s and 2 triggers to guard your rear guard columns. But then you can place the grade 1 that we talked at the beginning of this video and Soul Blast 1 to make them discard a card. So basically you destroy their guard pattern. because if they do not draw the exact same grade, you can basically say, well, this turn I just won. So there are some very dangerous combination plays you can do, but as I already stated now, that is a lot of key pieces that you need. You need the grade 3 VR, you need to have a grade 3 in your soul, you need to have 2 copies of this grade 2, you need to have the grade 3 rearguard, as well as at least one of the grade 1s. So yeah, it can, but if we're really realistic, it's probably not as deadly as we're gonna think. I think a lot of people are overestimating this card. It's certainly a deadly card, definitely on paper. When you look at it on paper, this card is insane. But when we're going into realistic situations with the amount of cards that we're going to need and in which order we need them and how fast it is, and we look at it in comparison with the rest of the decks and what other decks can do, then we can see that it's still in the realm of fairness. I think it's a little bit similar to what we had when Ganslot was revealed. A lot of people were losing their shit about the card, but the card is fair, and I think this card is also fair because besides this card, what does the clan actually do? And with this grade 2 that is making them drop a lot of cards. It's not that they're attacking for high numbers, it's not that they come with natural crits, they are very reliant on the fact that they need their key pieces, that their opponent isn't really doing anything, and that they cannot guard your low attack numbers. So I think when you combine all these cards together, it's pretty fair. And that's basically the end of this video. We talked about 6 of the 10 cards for Nubatama, and if we take into consideration that we are still needing the grade 1 perfect guard as well as the third crit, we might look at only 2 new cards if those cards aren't a new starter and a new vanilla card. So maybe this is everything that Nubatama is going to get. And then the question is this enough? Is this enough for Nubatama to make it more playable, more viable? I think in combination with the new grade 3 rearguard for Kokujyo Kongo, that can have a great potential. Of course, new VR can be very deadly, but I don't think Magatsu Storm has any place in this whatsoever. You can combine Magatsu Storm with the new VR to make a finishing turn when they only have 4 cards in hand, but that's very slow because you need to... That's basically your third grade 3 turn that you go into, and then the question is, didn't your opponent already kill you? Because Nubatama is one of the less defensive cards in the Protect marker archetype, so very curious how that's gonna be. But now I want to ask the question to you guys. What do you guys think of these new Nubatama cards that we got? What do you think of the VR? Do you think it's absolutely broken? Or do you think after watching this video that yes, it's strong, but it's still fair in comparison what the other clans can do and how you can counterplay the card? So I'm very curious what you guys think, your thoughts and opinions. So leave them down in the comments down below. But as always, I want to thank our Patreon supporters for supporting this channel. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel and basically everything that's happening on this channel, then head over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.